Pink Floyd weren't just any rock band, they were legends. By 2013, they had sold over 250 million records worldwide, crafting iconic albums like The Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall. Yet behind their cosmic music and mind-bending live shows, the band's story is a human drama. One vanished from public life, one waged war in court. Against his bandmates, one quietly returned before an untimely death. Another kept the beat going in new ways, and one led the final chapter of Pink Floyd's journey. Number 5. Syd Barrett was Pink Floyd's original frontman and creative spark, a true musical visionary who named the band and wrote their early hits. In the late 1960s, Syd's imaginative songwriting and experimental guitar sounds defined Pink Floyd's psychedelic era. But as quickly as his star rose, it fell just as fast. Syd began behaving erratically, often standing on stage in a daze or refusing to play. The cause? Many believe heavy LSD use worsened underlying mental health issues. His bandmates watched in dismay as Syd slipped away into his own world. In January 1968, the others made a painful decision. They left for a show without him, effectively ousting Syd from the band. The friend they once knew was now a shadow of himself, and Pink Floyd had no choice but to move on with a new guitarist, David Gilmour, taking Syd's place. After leaving Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett all but disappeared from the public eye. He tried a brief solo career, even releasing 2 solo albums in 1970, but his heart wasn't in it for long. By the early 1970s, Syd had drifted back to his hometown of Cambridge and withdrawn into an ordinary, quiet life. He painted artworks, tended the garden, and lived in his mother's modest house, far away from rock stardom. Fans and reporters would occasionally spot him on the street, a bald, heavier man, hardly recognizable as the flamboyant 60s icon. But Syd shunned any attention. In fact, he became something of a reclusive legend, the genius who went mad but didn't die young, instead living out decades in anonymity. Pink Floyd never forgot him, though. They famously wrote the song "Shine on You Crazy Diamond" as a tribute, longing for their lost friend. In a nearly unbelievable moment in 1975, Syd actually showed up, unannounced, at a Pink Floyd recording session while they were mixing that very song about him. Overweight, with a shaven head and eyebrows, he was so changed that none of his old bandmates recognized him at first. Syd listened quietly to the music meant for him and simply said, "It sounds a bit old." It was the last time any of them ever saw him, a final eerie cameo in the band's story. For the next 30 years, Syd lived peacefully in Cambridge, largely forgotten by the wider world. In the mid-2000s, as Pink Floyd's reunion rumors swirled, some wondered if Syd might ever reappear. But his time on the stage was long over. On July 7, 2006, Roger Syd Barrett died from pancreatic cancer at age 60. No Pink Floyd members attended his quiet funeral, but they all mourned the passing of the man who had been their guiding light in the early days. Number 4. Roger Waters was the driving force behind Pink Floyd through the 1970s, the mastermind of concept albums that defined an era. His intensely personal songwriting on Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and especially The Wall, turned Pink Floyd's music into profound storytelling. But with success came ego and conflict. By the early 1980s, Roger's relationship with the others, particularly guitarist David Gilmour, had soured. After the stressful recording of The Wall and its follow-up, The Final Cut, Roger was convinced Pink Floyd had run its course. In 1985, he quit the band, declaring Pink Floyd a spent force creatively without him. At the time, he likely assumed that would be the end of Pink Floyd. Little did he know, his departure would spark one of rock's messiest breakups. Waters didn't leave quietly. He took his ex-bandmates to court, attempting to prevent them from using the Pink Floyd name without him. Roger truly felt Pink Floyd was his artistic vehicle and that the others continuing as Pink Floyd would be a fraud. Meanwhile, David Gilmour and drummer Nick Mason firmly believed Pink Floyd belonged to all of them and wasn't Roger's to disband. A bitter legal battle ensued in the late 80s over who owned Pink Floyd. Ultimately, Roger lost that fight. Gilmour and Mason won the right to carry on the band, and they did so with great success. This outcome left Roger Waters resentful for years. As Nick Mason later quipped about Waters, Roger was fond of saying that no one is indispensable, and he was right. In other words, Pink Floyd survived without Roger, a truth that surely stung his pride. After leaving Pink Floyd, Roger Waters embarked on a solo career fueled by the same ambition and imagination he'd given the band. His solo albums, like The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking in 1984 and Amused to Death in 1992, didn't reach Pink Floyd-level sales, but Roger gradually found his footing outside the band. Decades later, he would stage some of the most spectacular live shows ever. In fact, from 2010 to 2013, he toured the world with The Wall Live, a modern restaging of Pink Floyd's album, complete with a giant wall built and torn down, on stage each night. That tour grossed around $458 million, briefly setting the record as the highest-grossing tour ever by a solo artist. It proved that Roger could connect with millions of fans on his own terms, a triumphant second act. Yet, the ghost of Pink Floyd always loomed. For years, Roger and David sniped at each other in the press, and a full reunion seemed impossible. Then came Live 8 in 2005. In a historic one-off moment, Roger Waters rejoined David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Richard Wright on stage in London to perform as Pink Floyd for the first time in 24 years. The world watched in awe as the four men hugged and played classics like Comfortably Numb Together, seemingly burying decades of animosity. It was a brief truce. After the show, Gilmour swiftly turned down a $150 million offer for a reunion tour, and the old tensions resurfaced. But for that night at least, Roger Waters stood smiling beside his former bandmates, giving fans closure to a long, unresolved chapter. Today, Roger Waters remains as outspoken as ever. He's now around 80 years old. He's still performing and touring with politically charged concerts. His relationship with Gilmour stays complex and distant. They are not exactly friends, but they aren't hurling insults either. Waters has expressed some regret over the years about how he handled leaving Pink Floyd, even admitting the lawsuit might have been a mistake. Nevertheless, he's carved out his own legacy, separate from the band. From co-founding Pink Floyd to staging one of the biggest solo tours in history, Roger's journey has been dramatic, contentious, but undeniably impactful. Love him or not, Roger Waters proved himself a visionary artist, one who, for better or worse, walked away from the monster band he helped create. Number 3. Richard Wright. Richard "Rick" Wright was Pink Floyd's gentle soul, the keyboard wizard who added dreamy textures and jazz touches to their sound. Unlike the fiery personalities of Waters or Barrett, Rick was quiet, even shy, content to let others take the spotlight. But make no mistake, his contributions were massive. The soaring organ on Echoes, the serene piano of Us and Them, and the entire composition of The Great Gig in the Sky were all Rick's work. He was a founding member and an integral part of Pink Floyd's chemistry. Sadly, by the end of the 70s, he became a casualty of the band's internal strife. During the making of The Wall in 1979, Roger Waters grew frustrated with Rick's lack of input and forced him to resign from the band. Imagine, a founder of Pink Floyd, effectively fired from his own group. It was a crushing moment for the reserved keyboardist. Yet, Rick Wright's story with Pink Floyd wasn't over. Ironically, after Roger Waters left in 1985, Rick was welcomed back into the fold. David Gilmour, now leading the band, invited Rick to play on the 1987 album A Momentary Lapse of Reason, though initially just as a paid session player due to legal technicalities. By the 1994 album The Division Bell, Rick was fully reinstated as an official member and contributed significantly, even co-writing 5 songs and singing lead on Wearing the Inside Out. For Rick, this return was a quiet vindication. The man who had been ousted came back to help Pink Floyd close out their final chapters. On stage during the 87 and 94 world tours, fans cheered to see Richard Wright back at his keyboard, smiling softly behind his shades as if he'd never left. After Pink Floyd's last tour, Rick largely stepped out of the limelight. He released a couple of solo albums over the years and often preferred sailing on his boat in the Greek islands to chasing rock fame. In the 2000s, he appeared alongside David Gilmour for some of Gilmour's solo concerts, including a memorable night in 2006 at the Royal Albert Hall, where they played Echoes together, a touching nod to their 1970s collaborations. Many hoped Rick would continue if Pink Floyd reunited beyond Live 8, but fate had other plans. In September 2008, Richard Wright died of cancer at age 65. His illness had been kept private, so the news came as a shock to fans. Tributes poured in, praising Rick's understated genius. Gilmour said, "Wright's soulful playing was at the heart of Pink Floyd's sound, and without him, it was hard to imagine the band ever performing as Pink Floyd again." Indeed, Rick's death truly marked the end of an era. Richard Wright's legacy is sometimes overlooked, but it's profound. He was the quiet pillar, holding up those towering soundscapes. When you listen to the ethereal opening of Shine on You Crazy Diamond, or the somber beauty of Us and Them, you're hearing Rick's voice as much as anyone's. His journey had ups and downs, from founding member to being sidelined, to a graceful comeback and final farewell. In the story of what happened to Pink Floyd's members, Rick Wright represents loyalty and humility. He never courted fame or drama, he simply loved making music. Number 2, Nick Mason is the only member of Pink Floyd who never left the band, not for a single day. The easygoing drummer managed to navigate all the chaos and egos while keeping the show on the road. In fact, Nick Mason is the only member to appear on every Pink Floyd album from start to finish. While Waters and Gilmour fought, or Barrett and Wright departed, Nick was the steady hand on the drumsticks, quietly holding things together. He's also known as the band's mild-mannered diplomat, often acting as the go-between when relationships grew tense. Nick's style was never flashy or self-promoting, much like Ringo Starr and the Beatles. He provided exactly what the music needed with tasteful restraint. Offstage, Mason had, and still has, a passion for fast cars and motor racing, which endeared him as the cool hobby guy in the group. But music remained in his blood. When Pink Floyd continued without Roger Waters in the late 80s, Nick was right there with David Gilmour, eager to carry on. He even collaborated occasionally with Waters later on, proving he held no grudges and could get along with everyone. After the Division Bell tour in 1994, Pink Floyd became inactive, and Nick Mason seemed content to step back from the rock star life. He wrote a best-selling memoir about the band, Inside Out, and indulged his love of auto racing, driving his classic Ferraris in amateur races. For a while, it looked like Mason might quietly retire, but you can't keep a drummer away from his kit forever. In 2018, well into his 70s, Nick surprised fans by forming a brand new band called Nick Mason's Saucerful of Secrets. The mission? To play Pink Floyd's early psychedelic songs, the ones from the Syd Barrett days that Pink Floyd themselves hadn't performed in decades. Mason gathered some talented musicians, including Floyd's longtime bass sideman Guy Pratt, and Spandau Ballet's Gary Kemp on guitar, and went on tour to resurrect vintage tracks like Arnold Lane and Interstellar Overdrive. Critics and fans loved it, as Nick brought those whimsical 1967-68 tunes back to life on stage. It was as if the youngest wide-eyed version of Nick Mason came full circle to his roots. To this day, Nick Mason remains the cheerful heartbeat of Pink Floyd's legacy. He's now the elder statesman of the group, often representing Pink Floyd at events and interviews. In recent years, while Gilmour and Waters sometimes trade barbs, Nick is the one who can share a joke with both. He's even jammed on stage with Roger Waters on occasion, and likewise with David Gilmour, proving that deep down, he just enjoys playing the music free of drama. Nick's personal life has been relatively free of scandal, and he carries a kind of avuncular vibe. Imagine your friendly uncle who also happened to drum on Wish You Were Here. Whatever happened to Nick Mason? Nothing shocking, and that's rather refreshing. He kept calm and drummed on. Now, in his late 70s, Nick is still touring with his Saucerful of Secrets project, drumming with the energy of a much younger man. Number 1. David Gilmour. Joined Pink Floyd in 1968 as the new guy, brought in to cover for Syd Barrett's onstage meltdowns. Little did he know he'd end up steering the ship through its stormy seas. Gilmour's soulful guitar solos and warm vocals quickly became a defining element of Pink Floyd's sound. On classics like Comfortably Numb and Time, it's Gilmour's voice and guitar that often send listeners into rock nirvana. During the 1970s, he mostly followed Roger Waters' conceptual lead, adding musical brilliance to Waters' ideas. But after Waters left, it fell on David Gilmour to carry Pink Floyd forward, a role he took on somewhat reluctantly. Under Gilmour's leadership, Pink Floyd released 2 hit studio albums, A Momentary Lapse of Reason, 1987, and The Division Bell, 1994, and even a final ambient-leaning album, The Endless River, in 2014. These records proved that the Floyd magic could continue, differently but successfully, without Roger. Massive tours in 87 to 89 and 94 saw Gilmour fronting the band in stadiums worldwide, his guitar solos wailing under endless laser lights. The band's post-Waters era earned both commercial success and a place in rock history on its own terms, thanks largely to David's gentle but steady guidance. Yet, David Gilmour was never the stereotypical egocentric rock star. Soft-spoken and introspective, he often expressed that the drama of Pink Floyd's internecine battles wore him out. After the Division Bell tour, Gilmour essentially put Pink Floyd on ice. Other than the one-off Live 8 reunion in 2005, which he helped make happen, surprisingly, by agreeing to play with Roger for charity, Gilmour was content to let Pink Floyd rest and focus on his solo life. Fun fact, right after Live 8, Gilmour declined a $150 million offer for a reunion tour, an almost unheard-of sum to refuse, but money wasn't the point for him. He valued the integrity of ending Pink Floyd on a high note without drawn-out reunions for cash. Instead, David devoted time to his family and personal musical projects. He released critically acclaimed solo albums like On an Island 2006 and Rattle That Lock 2015 and played select shows, often in beautiful historic venues. In 2016, he even performed at Pompey's Ancient Amphitheater, 45 years after Pink Floyd filmed a concert there with no audience. It was a symbolic closing of a circle for him. In recent years, David Gilmour has also been active in philanthropy, famously auctioning off many of his iconic guitars, including his Black Strat that crafted so many Floyd solos, and donating millions to charitable causes. He's shown that life after Pink Floyd can be grounded and generous. Musically, he still pops up now and then. As of 2024, Gilmour had released a new solo album, proving his creative spark continues well into his late 70s. Fans consider him one of the all-time great guitarists, Rolling Stone ranks him among the best, and his tone is often imitated but never duplicated. So, whatever happened to David Gilmour? He became the guardian of Pink Floyd's legacy. He ensured the band went out with dignity, releasing that last Floyd album, The Endless River, as a tribute to Rick Wright after his passing, using Wright's leftover recordings in a beautiful send-off. He also made sure Syd Barrett received his due royalties and respect. Gilmour has said he quietly took care of Syd's financial well-being over the years, a touching detail that shows David's character. Now, as the unofficial elder of Pink Floyd, Gilmour seems at peace. He occasionally collaborates with Nick Mason or guests with other artists, but mostly enjoys a quieter life. He's a grandfather, a country gentleman, and still an awe-inspiring musician when he chooses to step on stage. In essence, David Gilmour's post-Pink Floyd journey has been about graceful continuity, preserving the band's spirit without being trapped by it. While Roger was the architect of Pink Floyd's grand concepts, David became the heart and soul that carried those concepts into the future and kept them alive for new generations. Pink Floyd's classic lineup takes a bow at the Live 8 reunion concert in 2005, a final moment of unity for the legendary band.